topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, and I'm so excited. Just excited because I'm here with you. And I cannot tell you, Tuesday mornings are so wonderful. So I may have shared, but if you did not tune in, I want to share some exciting news. Our podcast is in top 10% globally. Yes. So we just recently found out through the listen notes that yes, our podcast is in top 10% of most listened podcasts globally. So I know I was pinching myself and just making sure that, really, did I hear it right? So folks, here's the thing. It's because of you. Listeners, it's because of you, because you reach out to me, you share with me, and you are listening to the podcast. But it's you that makes us achieve this milestone. And here's what I'm going to share with you is that if you're open to it, share with your friends and family, and let's even go higher and spread the message of love and kindness and embracing different things in our life and just, growing together as a humanity. So if that's something that speaks to you, do share our podcast because you have made this possible. You are the life and soul and blood and everything of this podcast. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I just wanted to give you my heartfelt thanks for all the support you have shown and just wanted to share what has happened. So today, what we are going to be talking about is even though we are different, we are still the same. And I want to thank each and every one of you for helping us support Kiva.org. And in Kiva.org, we help entrepreneurs all across the globe because I do believe entrepreneurs are the change makers. So we do so by taking partial profits from our books and sharing it with Kiva. So thank you, folks, for all of those you who have purchased our books. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I don't have enough thanks in my bank, but I can share with you, you have my gratitude from my heart. And also I'm going to invite you to take a minute and share that 1 hour of your time with anyone or multiple people throughout the month where you will give back with no strings attached. There are no expectations, just let that kindness flow. So let's bring on our guest, Jenn Grindeland. Welcome, Jenn.
Hi, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm excited to have you. So Jenn, usually we begin at the earlier part of our guest. So tell us, do you recall a moment or a person that has left a mark on you and is still as fresh in your memory or in your experience even today?
Yeah, I do. My my cheerleading coach from high school actually comes to mind. She just really believed in me and wanted the best for me. And I had gone through some really tough things in high school.
Mm.
And she saw me persevere through that and celebrated that, which was cool because it felt really isolating at times what I was going through.
It can. And like what happens, like we are also listening, right? That today's youngsters are feeling more and more isolated. So just having somebody by your side who believes in you can make such a huge difference. So definitely that makes sense. And so how did you feel about your coach?
I felt like I could go to her for anything, and
Mm.
that no matter what, she would still treat me with love and respect and understanding. And especially at, going through puberty and the time of your life when things are changing so much, there's a lot of questioning that I had at that time. Like, who am I really? What's going on? Who do I want to be? And so to have that solid person to lean on meant a lot.
Mhm. That's beautiful. So she was an anchor to you that helped you stabilize your boat in those rocky waters
Hmm.
and find your way and find your destination. And that's so beautiful. So, as you grew out of high school, what was the next step that happened in your life?
You mean in terms of the next person or just in
Next
general?
person in general, where did your life take you?
I felt like I really took um, that experience of high school, of who I had been shaped into, and took that into my college career and beyond, and really was able to feel, you know, it was hard still because there was still a lot of questioning of like, for me, what I'm kind of referring to is I had some brain injuries in high school. And so I wanted to
Oh,
use that experience to help people and to learn more
mm,
about the brain and study the brain and then help other people who had
mm,
similar experiences. And there's, still a lot of questioning with that because it's so unique and misunderstood at times. So I
right.
felt like I still felt sometimes like, is this really, the right path? Is this what people
Mm,
want from me?
mm.
Is this what I'm meant to do? But I continued to push forward and ended up, that's what I'm doing now. So yeah.
So, thank you for sharing that because it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable and sharing. So, would you be open to sharing about your brain injuries and how did it happen? And
Hmm. Yeah. So I've had a few actually. My first one was in high school when I was 15.
mm,
I was at cheerleading when it happened. I had
so young,
yeah, yeah, really young for that. So the brain isn't fully developed until
right?
you're between 24 and 26. So I had to make a lot of choices. I decided not to drink until I was much older, even though all of my friends were. And so I backtrack. I'm kind of missing the story, but what happened was I was warming up for a football game that we were going to cheer that night, and I had over rotated a backflip,
Mm,
and so the momentum, sprung me off of the floor backwards, and then I fell down. The floor dropped down a couple feet, and then there was a concrete wall right
oh,
there.
oh my
So
goodness.
my head jammed into the
Oh,
wall, and my coach just sprinted over from across the other side of the gym and wanted to make sure that I was okay. And she was just so caring and loving when I was just like in a complete daze. Like, I didn't, what just happened? Like, what does this mean? Am I going to be okay? So she supported me, through the next couple of years of complete unknown. And my mom too really supported me, helping me go to doctor's appointments and things like that. Because, I wasn't even old enough to drive yet. So I needed someone else to take me to those appointments. And then, so if we, fast forward to college, it really affected, my social life, how I decided to, like I said, I didn't drink and party like all of my friends until I was almost out of college. And I decided to study psychology with a focus in neuroscience. And then I got my master's, and I really pushed forward. And, I was told, like, you're not going to go to college. And even if you do, you're not going to graduate in 4 years. And I just hated that. I was like,
It's almost like you are dooming the person and like writing their future, rather than like, the same thing could be said that it might take longer. You can do it.
Right.
So yes, you want to give person the reality. We understand, like, doctors, because what happens is so many times doctors get sued if you're not told, but there's a way of delivering things. Because I can't even imagine a 15-year-old, you're a child back then, going through all this, and your whole life is ahead. And then all of a sudden you are pulled out of the mainstream. Like you said, that you are not drinking, and that takes courage. So Jenn, I cannot tell you how much that inspires me, that you are just kind of able to make that decision at such a young age. And yes, you're absolutely right. The brain doesn't develop fully till 25.
Yeah.
So as a result of the injury, what difficulties were you facing?
Well, specifically, I experienced a lot of headaches and nausea. I had anger issues, which I don't know if they were 100% due to the impact on the brain or a reaction to everything I was going through, plus the, puberty and all of that at the same time. But that's hard to say, but there is a correlation between anger and traumatic brain injuries. So, I went through that. It was just mostly I developed a visual disorder called convergence insufficiency disorder, which essentially means each eye makes their own image, and they cross over, and that's called converging. So we only see one image, and my eyes had a really hard time doing that. And I didn't see double very often, but what would happen instead was my eyes would get tired after reading a sentence. I would have a headache and nausea for 4 hours. That's why school was so difficult for me, because I literally couldn't read anymore. And so I went to vision therapy for a while and help, got some help with that. And I still to this day have trouble, and I set timers when I'm working. Don't let myself work for more than 20 minutes at a time. And so that was one of my symptoms. I also was really sensitive to loud noises and flashing lights. So, even driving to school with my neighbors who like to blast the music in the car was really difficult. I would, not always have the courage to say something. I would just kind of deal with it. But, that's hard.
It's very hard. I mean, you went through such a difficult time that it's very inspiring. And I'm sure that our listeners and audience will think the same way, that like here you were told that you'll not even finish college, and you can see why. And yet not only you finished bachelor's, you finished your master's. So how did you push through during those years as young as you were?
A lot of timers, perseverance. I really did not like someone telling me that I couldn't do what I wanted to do. And so I just set out to prove them wrong. And I actually graduated early. I graduated.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. So I graduated each program a semester early. So I ended up getting my bachelor's and master's in only 5 years. And it just, to me, like I've always been a hard worker, you know, good in school. And so I just didn't want this injury to change the course of my life in what I wanted, who I was really, which to me, my identity very strongly was a smart kid, a hardworking,
Mhm.
smart kid.
Mhm.
And so I was determined to keep that up and keep doing that and just, you know, change what I studied because of the brain
Mhm.
injury. I was super interested in learning more about the brain because, you know, my doctors told me, you're our mystery patient. We don't know how to treat you. And I was like, that's not something anyone ever wants to hear. Thank
Right.
you. So I was
Well,
determined to
you
go
didn't
learn
let
about
it
it
define
myself.
you. And then that's what tells us, like, you know, things will happen in your life, but don't let that define you, because the person you are, that doesn't change, and you
Mhm.
are a living example of that.
Yeah, the core of who you are doesn't change, but maybe how
Mhm.
you use it changes, maybe based off
Yes,
your life experiences.
definitely. So you finished your master's, then
So then I
where
was
did you go next?
working professional, and for a couple years, and then I had 2 more brain injuries.
Oh,
Um, so they were within 6 months of each other, so essentially back to back. And so that really is what shaped, you know, the work that I'm doing now,
mm,
you know, supporting people in the workplace, because through that experience, you know, I really witnessed people having no idea how to support me, what to do with me, and not to any fault of their own. It's just not something ever taught or talked about. You know, we don't, it's really hard for us to support people who are, you know, different
different.
from us in a way that we can't actually see. So, you know, you can't see a brain injury.
Correct.
So it's hard to support it.
Absolutely. So can you share with us, like, what happened within a span of 6 months?
Sure. Yeah. The first one, I was snowboarding, and
Mm.
I actually, this is probably going to surprise a lot of people listening here. I actually did not even hit my head. I fell on my butt. And the bounce like jolted up my spine and bounced my brain against my skull, which
Mm.
gave me a brain injury. And because if we think about the brain in the skull, compare it to an egg and the yolk inside of an egg. If you shake the egg,
Mm-hmm.
the yolk is going to bounce against
The shell.
shell.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens in the brain. We don't necessarily have to have an impact to the brain to get a brain injury.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first one while I was working, technically my second one. And then, so I missed a lot of work, had to deal with, you know, all of the paperwork and things like that. And then that was in March. That was
Mm-hmm.
St. Patrick's Day, actually. And then September 9th, I want to say, or 7th, something around there, I was driving to work and I got rear-ended.
Oh no. So then this was again another jolt.
Yes. So this one I did hit the back of my head against the
Oh,
headrest. And I was confused and I didn't get the person's insurance and I just kept driving to work. And I realized, you know, I knew something happened. You know, I got there and I was like, I think I just got a concussion or, you know,
mm.
something. And so I actually had someone at work who could evaluate it. And she said, yeah, you rung your bell. You need to probably go home. So the timeline kind of reset. of recovery. I kind of, the previous 6 months of recovery didn't really matter anymore. It kind of started over in September with the second one. And, if you have one brain injury, you're more likely to get another one. It doesn't take as hard of a hit to have the same reaction. So that being my third one, with several little concussions here and there throughout my lifetime, as a lot of active people likely get over time. It was difficult. I missed a lot of work. Once I started to go back, there was a lot of questions like, why aren't you better yet? Because it was, several months to a couple of years. It was probably 2 years until I was able to work full time again.
As a result, like, you already had the vision and other issues as a result of the next two brain injuries. What else, like, were you
So those
problems or
symptoms,
challenges you were facing?
yeah, those symptoms kind of just came flooding back. So I had gotten to a point where I was able to manage them pretty well, but the subsequent brain injuries kind of just brought them back into full force. So I was unable to read again, be in front of a screen, things like that. And I went to physical therapy, vestibular therapy in particular, to help with that. I wasn't able to get into a vision therapist here. I live in a different state than I did when I was growing up. So my same doctor wasn't an option. But yeah, that helped me a lot. And I got really involved with the Brain Injury Alliance of Colorado. I'm in Colorado. And it was just a great support network. And I continue to volunteer with them. And so I would say symptoms wise, it was about the same as what I experienced before. So I kind of knew what to do. Doesn't really make it any easier, but
Of course not. I'm so sorry you've had to go through. And it sounds like, every time you've looked it in the eye and said, you know what, I'm not going to let it define me or defeat me. So you mentioned that, there were issues at work where, you were asked, why aren't you better? So how did you deal with that?
Self-advocacy and communication strategies, and really trying to do my best and communicate what I needed to succeed. In, for example, I needed to work in a quiet setting at home so that I could take frequent breaks in a comfortable setting, so taking breaks in an office isn't feasible, very comfortable. Right? You sit around and just like stare at the wall and, what are you going to do for a break? Whereas at home, I can lay down on the couch, pet my dog. So that is an example. I really pushed that, I needed to work from home. And this was an office where working from home was not normalized or allowed normally. So,
right. And then did that work out, or you?
Yeah, that worked out as long as I had a doctor's note. So I worked really closely with my vestibular therapist to provide updated weekly notes about what I can and can't do and what I need at work in order to, to complement my recovery process. And so, it worked to an extent. I would say that my peers and supervisors still didn't understand really what was going on. And it's difficult when you are trying to heal your brain to go above and beyond and explain everything to someone or to everyone, your coworkers. So, I had a hard time, I'm not going to lie. They, didn't, there was a lot of tension in the team. And I ended up leaving that position. So, yeah.
So after you left, and it's very hard, and we will kind of dive deep into how we can bring that advocacy, because if somebody is suffering, whether it is, mental illness or chronic illness, as you have mentioned, or injury that people cannot see, how can we embrace those differences and just bring it together where, and I can share with you, Jen, that I've got several clients whose stories are very similar and yet very different. And they're A performers. It's just that when they are pulled into the fold, when we accept that, like, there are differences and it's okay. Things can change, and when we're inclusive. So I've got full faith in that. So share with us, what did you do next and where are you now right now?
Sure. Yeah. So that experience really inspired me to start a business
Mm-hmm.
teaching people, teaching organizations leadership skills to support hidden differences. So that, encompasses a lot of different types of differences. And we don't need to get into all the specifics, but, just teaching people that there's differences you can't see. Statistics show average of 30% of the workforce has some sort of difference. So how can we support something that we don't know is there? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what I do now. I got my master's in organizational leadership. And so I combined the leadership degree with my psychology degree and my experience to create this business where I'm specifically putting it all together, teaching leadership skills designed to support hidden differences in the workplace.
Oh, that's beautiful. So let's kind of go, okay, you're an organization. We are going to look at, I'm going to bring in, like, maybe three different types of organization and see what message you can give them. So one is, let's say it's a very small mom and pop's business. They may have maybe 10, 15 employees, not many resources at hand, and they have got a couple of employees who may be facing something where they need accommodation.
Mhm.
And there are, like, for example, like one of my clients has ADHD, and it's not that he doesn't want to focus, or she doesn't want to focus. It's just that they're different, and it's just the working style is different, which needs to be accommodated. So that's one scenario. The second scenario is, like, it's a mid to growing, a, a startup which is growing, and then there is a lot of work which is very, very fast paced that needs to happen. And now you have few employees who need just some adjustments and adaptations. And then there are companies that are very well established. So leaders at the home of these type of companies, how can they go about where we can include and embrace those differences and allow them to, where we can nurture our people and
Mhm.
let them blossom?
I would say for all three organizations, the first
Hmm.
step would be to learn more about the ways that people are different from one another, and
Hmm.
how they can be a complement to the organization. So for example, you mentioned ADHD, and yes, while it can be difficult for someone with ADHD to focus, they also typically are very creative, and when it's
Hmm.
a topic that they really are interested in, they hyper focus and can get an insanely impressive amount of work done on a specific topic. So knowing that these differences can actually be an asset to the company is the first step. And
So
then
before we
Mhm.
go into further deep, like, let's
Sure.
go, because for social media, whatever reason, we do find a lot of employees with ADHD. And then what happens is, when the routine stuff is given to them, they're not able to do it. They get unmotivated. There's very low lying desire to do things, and then they fall behind. So can you go a little bit deeper as to how could people accommodate them? And even before we go into that, what's the best way? Like, so many people are hesitant sharing that, oh, I don't want to look different than somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard for them to open up. So what could a manager do that, hey, a new employee comes in, or even if there's an existing employee, even before they start struggling, what are the steps a good manager, a good leader could do so that they're nurturing and allowing everyone, including people who may have differences, to flourish?
Love that question. Being open about the fact
Mhm.
that as a leader, they support all different types of differences, and having a conversation regarding success and saying, asking questions such as, I want to set you up for success. Let's talk about how we can do that. In what scenarios and what environments are you the most successful? What topics excite you the most? What do you want to work on? Especially if we're, using the example of ADHD, yes, they need to have a topic that they care about. Otherwise, as you said, they're not gonna be motivated to work on it because their brain just can't. It's really
Right,
difficult.
right.
It's so difficult to push yourself when you really just don't care about a specific topic. So asking those questions and letting the employee be a full partner in those
Mhm.
decisions and those communication um, using those communication strategies together to talk about success as an individual, success as a team, department, and company at large. We want each person to use their skills and not hide them to get tedious work done. If we're
Yeah.
continuing to use the example of ADHD, a similar difference in the brain is autism, and typically people with autism really want very direct and focused instructions, and
Mhm.
maybe that's too boring, quote unquote boring, for someone with ADHD. So maybe that's a way we can split up the work. But we can't just assume that, because there's a
Right.
lot of people who have both, and every person with each diagnosis is different, such as, same with brain injuries. Yeah, there's a saying in the brain injury community: if you've met one person with a brain injury, you've met one person with a brain injury. They're all so different.
Of course.
Even, within one person having multiple, each one is a little bit different. So communication is the biggest strategy for a leader, is to
Mm.
directly talk to each employee, and ask them those questions I mentioned earlier. How can we set you up for success? Offer ideas.
Mhm.
So that's not, all on that employee to come up with everything, because that can feel like a lot of pressure.
Right, right. It's like you mentioned, that having that partnership and creating a safe space where they feel that they can express themselves, where they feel creating that culture in that organization that everyone is welcome, because regardless of the brain injuries, because that's one thing, that labeling, that's one thing that I say, that a human being is much more, a person is much more than their differences or whatever they're experiencing there. So we don't want to like identify them by that. It's everybody comes with a different experience, and so everybody's going to be different. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, when you look at a general family, 4 or 5 kids, or even 2 kids, or like, 3 kids from the same family are so different. So we are different, and it's about embracing those differences and creating that safe space, that it's okay to be different. And we are not somebody, you are not your label, you're not your diagnosis, you're not whatever it is, doesn't matter, like, whoever, you're not that. Your core is different. And then I really like what you said, is that bring them into the fold, have that partnership, you take also some ownership, so, and moving it step by step. So okay, so let's say you discover, the employee opens up, you discover how they may need different circumstances. Let's say if the company is not for it,
Mm-hmm.
what can a manager or a leader do to support their employees if the culture is still growing and not fully where it needs to be?
Yeah, we can't unfortunately always give all the accommodations that someone might request. It's not always in our control as a leader to do that if it's against company policy. So that's the time that we can get creative and continue that conversation. So if an example might be for someone is much more successful when they work from home. And let's say the company doesn't allow work from home. Okay. What else can we do? So let's think about, why is work from home successful for this person? It's likely quiet. It's probably comfortable. Maybe let's say they have a dog and they do well with their dog while they're working, and they have access to food. Okay. Well, can we find an office that's really quiet for them? Can we give them an enclosed space, even if we maybe most typically work in cubicles? Can we find them in a closed space? Is that allowed with the company policy? Do we have a dog-friendly office? Could we maybe push for that if it's not allowed? They're not allowed to work from home, and we can go through each of the qualities of why this particular request would help them, and see if we can find those qualities in a different setting that would be allowed. And allow that person, I'll allow the employee to, again, be a partner in that conversation, because maybe it's not the fact that they have their dog. Maybe it's the fact that they have access to a couch and they work well on a couch. And so, okay, can we put a couch in their office? In my, at my last employer, that was a request that I got approved. I got a couch in my office so that I could take my breaks in a comfortable situation setting. So, it doesn't have to be, I don't want to, I don't want people to think from this conversation that we need to say yes to all accommodations, because like you said, Divya, that's just not always a reality. And we can't always control that, even if we want to give someone an accommodation they're requesting. So it's a continual creative conversation about how we can support someone.
Doing the best you can, because here's, like you shared, right? Like one thing that told you, oh, you can't even finish you'll not be able to graduate from college. Just saying that, hey, I believe in you. I'm here for you. Giving them that support is going to go so much more than just giving them that office. Being there with them and educating the team members, bringing in empathy. And bringing in gratitude, because so many times, like people are just sitting and complaining, oh, I'm working 9 hours, oh, she said this, oh, this happened, and just kind of helping people see that, yes, what you're complaining about, it's only like 5% of your life, whereas it is somebody else, it could be so much more difficult for them. So creating that culture, that harmonious culture, which welcomes people. So having that, and you come from psychology also, so share with us, like, a little bit about mindset and how accommodations cannot be made. Physical things may not be possible. What could the leader do to create that harmonious culture?
I think you really said it, being that kind person who is there to support the employee is huge, because especially as that employee going through the accommodations process, if you're going through HR to, fill out all the formal paperwork and get the doctor's note and all those things, usually you're kind of by yourself filling out all of that paperwork, because it's kind of an unknown topic from the leader standpoint. A lot of team leaders who don't work in HR don't really know how that works. They kind of just let HR deal with it and they take a step back. And so regardless if it's the accommodation process or it's just someone's just having a hard day, whatever it is, being that kind, reliable support system is huge. It can really make someone feel like, okay, this is a place that supports my differences. This is a place that I can feel supported, and that even if, the accommodations aren't possible and the technical side of things are difficult, this is so much more emotional than it is technical. And we always say, everyone has heard this before, likely, that people leave teams, or they leave their supervisor rather than the actual job. So say the actual job can't let you work from home or whatever it is, but your boss is so supportive and willing to talk with you about other options, or just, let you complain and vent about it, even if other
Yes.
options aren't available, but just someone you can count on and talk to, like a real human being. Sometimes it can feel so formal, and there is a line. We don't want to be necessarily like buddy with everyone all the time.
Right.
There is
Right.
a line of
Right.
professionality we need to have, but that doesn't mean we can't be kind and supportive
Yeah.
and caring.
Yeah. And you said it, that just being there as a support. And when the employee knows that, yep, they're being supported, and also identifying, as you mentioned, that those questions are very powerful, what environment, what topic, and then assigning them those areas. And then they are going to outperform other people. Or, I mean, there's no comparison here. What I'm saying is that they will be a very valuable member, because the key is that people want to be heard, people want to be recognized, people want to be valued, and people want to belong.
Mhm.
So rather than isolating them, as you mentioned, when you're having that inclusive environment, when they're part of the team, it will go a long ways. So share with us, Jen, how do you help organizations? How do you help people? You're doing such valuable work out there in the world. So needed, so needed.
Thank you. So I teach organizations in the format of workshops. So I
Mhm.
have introductory workshops where I talk about hidden differences and how it relates to team culture and what you can do about it. But then for organizations who really, want to move beyond the awareness step and actually learn the skills that we talked about today to transform their team culture and make it inclusive and really support it one another, I have a program. It's a 5-part workshop series with optional add-ons for one-on-one coaching or small discussion groups, where we get into the details of leadership skills, communication skills. There's one on hidden differences, inclusivity. So like, what technical practices can you add in
Mm.
and to your policies or whatever it is, or just your practices, such as how can you email more, in a way that's more inclusive. And then the 4th one is self-advocacy, and the 5th is energy management. So it
Mhm.
helps everyone from the top of the chain to the bottom. All of the material is relevant to everybody. I firmly believe that leadership is not positional, and an entry-level employee can be a leader. So these workshops are for everyone to learn all of these skills together.
Agreed. I say that you can be a leader where you're at.
Mhm.
And as we had started talking about in the beginning, if you just kind of give somebody a smile, you are a leader that day, because you don't know what kind of a day they're having. Just showing kindness, starting out with little, and energy management really sounds well, because it's an energy that perks us up, an energy that gives us the coping mechanisms to go through difficult times. And everybody's going to have difficult times. So that really sounds great. So, yeah, listeners, if you are listening, and if there's a need, I'm sure you'll be contacting Jen. So, Jen, where can they get in touch with you?
A few different ways. So I would start with my website, which is theworkingwell.us. And on there, I have a few resources. There's, you can contact me through there, but I also have a few free resources, such as an inclusive
Mhm.
communication checklist, where you can audit your own communication practices and see what's missing, what can you add in, what are you already doing great at, and good job. And I also have a free support group for employees with hidden differences to get the support that they feel like maybe they're missing in their workplace. We all come together once a month. It's actually tomorrow is our next one. Tomorrow, 12 to 1 p.m. Mountain Time. It's virtual. And then, I'm also on LinkedIn, and I don't honestly use LinkedIn a whole lot, but I am on there if someone prefers to reach out to me that way or email me. It's just my first name, Jenn, with 2 N's at theworkingwell.us.
Well, thank you, Jenn, for sharing your wisdom and bringing this important topic to light, because it's important that we move forward with kindness, because it doesn't matter how different we are. All of us want us to be happy. We all have the same dreams. We all have the same pains. And we all have same aspirations. So by that, we are connected and we are one. So thank you. And thank you, listeners, for joining us, because without you, the show would not be possible. And keep on sharing the cheer and the kindness. Thank you a lot. And thank you, Juan, for making the show possible. So be well and take care. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.